So, 80 students from 2014. Can you tell me a little bit about how you managed your time, how you managed your learning during the year?
An awful lot of note taking. I think it can't be stressed enough that you do have to take a lot of notes with AT French, vocab especially. It's one of those things that when it comes to revision will be invaluable, and you might not think about it so much before. You might think, okay, I've heard it once, we've talked about it in class, I'm going to remember it from September through to June. Not likely to happen. Just, be prepared to spend a lot of money on paper and just note a lot of stuff down.
I would add as well that a big key to managing time in A2 French is just keeping it going constantly, because the more you do, really, the more you learn, and also by the time it gets to exam, because it's a skill rather than just learning a load of facts, it really does help to have been building it up over the year and increasing your level.
I also think lots of it is organisation, because there will be times where it feels like you're being kind of bombarded by information, but as long as you can sort things out and know what that piece is going to be useful for later, and find it all together, because then when it gets to revision, it will all be there for you, and you'll know where you have to look for certain things, which makes it a lot easier.
Making like an index for the swathes of booklets that you're receiving is quite useful. I would recommend taking a piece of A4 at the start of the year and saying, article for immigration topic, page 12, article for etc., and just leaving that at the front of your notes, so that when it comes to revision, you're not having to dig through things and spending hours looking through things to look for something that might prove useful later.
Okay. So, how did you prepare for the essay, particularly in the run-up to the exam?
I think one of the main things was at the beginning, so we'd be set essays just to do in as much time as we needed, in any conditions we wanted. And I think with those, I'd really recommend spending a really long time on it, because then you're going to give yourself some really good work there that you
How
can
much
then...
is a really long time?
5 or 6 hours.
Yeah, a solid
Yeah.
afternoon or
Yeah,
a solid couple of free periods kind of thing. So that when it comes to doing timed conditions one, you've kind of got something really solid that you can go from, because if you kind of force yourself to do something in exam conditions at the beginning, it's not going to be the standard you want. But then, so once you've given it in to be marked, then you'll get it back, and it will be easy to revise for.
I'd definitely recommend keeping your the essays you're going to learn from neat as well when you're practicing essays. As much as you can make them neat, because then that just makes it a little more aesthetically easy to look back on. Or do them online.
So
keep
you
them
can
on.
access them really easily.
And do share and compare things with friends. I think so if you've written a good paragraph, be a bit bragging and text them and say, I've written this paragraph, I'll email it to you. They'll probably respond and say, well, I've done this. Take ideas from each other, because the exam board, there's really only a finite amount of things that they could feasibly mark, so make sure that you show them, and as much as you can take from any other sources is great.
Yeah, it will seem very tedious spending so much time in the essays, but we really can't stress enough just how much it helped by the time we got to the exam. And also, looking back from the first essay you've done to the ones you're producing around exam time, you can see a clear difference if you've put the effort in throughout the year doing different essay titles, and there's really an improvement there.
Yeah, and I also think the feedback you get is vital. So every time you've done an essay, even if you get some bad feedback, that's actually really useful for the next one. So don't be disheartened if one is rubbish, because you're going to end up doing a lot. So there's always an opportunity to do an amazing one, as long as you don't do what you did wrong in the last one.
And I think the thing with the essays is don't ever get too bogged down in trying to make it overly analytical. The thing to focus on is the quality of the French and the French language at the end of the day. As long as you're on the question, then do that. So I'd say that when you write an essay, even again if you do it on a separate bit of paper, write the title really big and leave it on your desk, so you're always referring. It's always there. You always know what you're referring to in your paragraphs.
Okay, thank you. Listening skills. How did you develop your listening skills successfully during the year, and again in the run-up to the exam?
Pardon?
Listening skills.
I think one of the things that especially at the beginning of the year, was listening to TF1 or France Still, the two big French news channels. Because at first you'll feel like an idiot sitting there with people talking ridiculously quickly, and you won't get anything. It'll be a bit tedious every day. But then if you are doing it regularly, about halfway through the year, you'll notice that you're picking things up, and you'll notice that you're actually really understanding what's going on. Then when it gets to exam time, you can listen to a French news report and really understand it, and then you'll come to an exam piece of listening and it seems you can understand every single word, and you don't have the issue in the exam then of having to decipher things impossibly. And I also think, speaking of the exam recordings, if you make sure you listen to them before, because it's the voice they use, it's the kind of structure they use, those that they're going to repeat.
Following them with transcripts can be really useful. Listen to it once without, then follow it with a transcript, and then do it again. And the other thing that I would add to what James has said is that it doesn't have necessarily to be news. If you don't want to watch that, like I ended up watching this year's series of The Voice, the French Voice. Mika's in it, so go watch it. And I also ended up watching The Simpsons in French as well.
Watch The Return.
Yeah, that's really good. There's
Yeah.
lots of series and films and so many different mediums of French that you can watch, and they all help to improve your listening skills.
And if you've got Sky at home, you should have TV5 as well. Like, it's part of the Sky package, so if you've got that, I do recommend TV5 as well. Just anything and everything, really.
Yeah, also with listening, although it's not directly listening, I think it's definitely worth looking up false friends and I can't remember the name, but words that sound the same.
Homophone.
That's the one. Because that's really helpful. I think in some of the past listenings, there's been words that have tricked people out. Like, wasn't it séparé?
Séparé.
Yeah.
So they're going to do it on purpose.
Yeah, because they will try and catch you out. But if you wise up on those, you can help kind of consider the context and then pick out and not get mixed up.
And I think when it comes to the actual exam itself, when you're doing the listening, just don't be flustered by it, because I think it is quite natural to listen to something and go, okay, what? I have to do a double take. But you can slow it down, and you're not going to be able to listen to a listening without stopping it. And I think that you shouldn't be, like at the start of the year I was a bit put off by stopping it. I was like, does that mean I'm not actually as good as I want to be, as I need to be? But it's not, it's just managing the paper, and if you save yourself time on earlier questions and the more difficult listening questions, you will have time to do that.
And the recording itself is only between 5 and 8 minutes long, but then you can allow yourself a good half an hour on the listening section, so there's nothing wrong with stopping it to get your head around it.
Was it useful on the day of the exam, coming in here just after 8 o'clock
Yeah,
and doing some listening?
Yeah, so you just get used to it, your ears are kind of tuned to it.
help keep me relaxed more than anything else.
Yes.
Yeah, it was quite, I think I didn't do anything really hardcore that morning. Like, I didn't go on Zoo, I didn't do any actual exercises, I just watched some French TV. I listened to a lot of French commercials and stuff. I listened to some French radio on my phone that morning, and it was just, I think it's just about getting yourself exposed to it. It's not necessarily that you need to be walking to college picking everything up, because if you try to, you won't get stuff, and then you go, oh God, I'm panicking, it's the morning of the exam. Just take, just immerse yourself in it.
And there are lots of like free French podcasts on iTunes that you can get. So that a few nights before the exam, I would go to sleep listening to them just to get it in your head.
It's like that Dexter episode where he falls asleep with the French CD on. There's no one watched it. Dexter's bad. You had sad childhoods.
Sorry.
Okay, so moving on then to reading. How did you develop your skills during the year, and how did you prepare yourself for the exams?
I think the thing with reading would be vocab that catches you out, because you'll get to a point where if there are 2 or 3 words in a sentence that you don't understand, you can't answer the question. So I think every time you do a reading passage, even if it's not from the exam board, if there's vocab you don't know that seems useful, just note it down. It's so easy to, at the beginning of the year, start an A3 page of vocab that you don't know, and then just keep that going. At first it seems like you're never going to need that word, but the fact is they can put any word they like in the exam. So
yeah, and I think possibly in the actual build-up to the exam, probably the best thing I did to prepare for reading, I went through pretty much all of the most recent past exam papers and some of the older ones, went through all the readings and translations and just picked out vocab, because AQA like to repeat tricks. Like, I think in 2013 they referred to France as the hexagon, and I was like, what? Like, I had no idea. But obviously I wisened up on that, and then this year they did it again, and so if you hadn't gone through the paper you possibly wouldn't know, and they do like to repeat vocab and words and little tricks. So that definitely helps.
And it is looking out for things like Catherine said, like little idioms and things like that can be very useful. So like être chèvre, to be a goat, to be angry, they will put something like that in. So if you see something that just makes no sense, then that's probably more a sign of anything else than going and looking it up. So I'd say that just be, throughout the whole year, be diligent about looking stuff up. Don't be put off by something you don't understand.
And moving on then to the translation sentences into French, into English. Any hints and tips then?
I think with the French into English, the fact is you're not going to be translating everything directly, because that's not going to sound right, so you kind of have to get yourself into the mindset that you're trying to make it sound as normal as it can in English, because obviously you're not going to get it how it would perfectly be translated, but don't try and force yourself to do things exactly how they should be, if that makes sense. Try and make it sound fluent in English, and that's probably the easiest thing to kind of let yourself maybe change a couple of things in the sentence, because it probably is going to be in the marks.
Also, and I'm sure Shirley will say it, but the key to the translations is always grammar. So make sure to go through all of the grammar lists. I think on the AQA website they've got a list of all the grammar which is included in the A2. So just go through everything on that, pronouns, all the tenses. And also if you have a question about grammar during the year, don't be afraid to ask. Like I remember I think I asked Shirley a question about how to say could have and something, and I think that came up in one of the translations. So it's just every little bit of grammar that you can get your hands on, really learn it and absorb it, and then it'll probably come up in the translation.
Learning grammar can be quite a dull thing. But it's the foundation of everything at A2, the essay, the translation as well. And to find ways to make it interesting. The best way for me to learn it is to go into a conversation with someone and just try and speak in a variety of tenses, use a variety of things. And if it goes wrong and Shirley says, actually, you're wrong, don't break down into tears, take what's correct and try and build it in again. Go back and have another go. Don't just think, okay, I won't do that again, I'll leave it, go back and have another go.
Also the same thing goes as with the reading. Vocabulary is obviously something that you'll need, because it's probably likely that what will trip you up in a translation is a word that you don't know. So going through all the topic-specific vocab, especially remembering to go through all the topics. So for the speaking, I don't know if it'll be the same next year, but we just focused on environment and immigration. So I made sure to go through all of the vocab and all of the points for crime and poverty, and just in case they came up in the translation. So that's something to remember. Just make sure you know all the words you need to know.
And I was going to say we got a booklet of translations from the old exam, which were actually a lot harder than the newer ones, and it really helps doing a really tough translation, because you're going to get a lot more vocab then, and maybe like one or two of the pieces of vocab might come up in one of the slightly easier ones. So there's lots of resources out there.
Yeah, the orange booklet was very helpful.
Yeah.
So then we move to the oral exam, the speaking. Again, hints and tips for during the year, preparation practice in the run-up to the orals.
Hot sheets.
Yeah.
So throughout the year we made A3 sheets with the different topics for the speaking, so the different branches of immigration and of environment and also grammar. And that was just so helpful, because when it got around to the time of the exam we could go to those sheets, pick out all of the really grammar-rich and interesting phrases that if we were writing them then we possibly might not have the energy to do. So that was very helpful, and it's also worth remembering that you can do that in any medium that fits you well. So I did mine on smaller revision cards, and that was really incredibly helpful at the time, because I had all of the resources that I needed there. So it's just a case of learning them and practicing and becoming a little bit more fluent.
I think with the speaking you have to obviously convey an opinion. So if you can find something controversial, on the internet, you can find an article in one of the French papers, Le Figaro or something like that. Take it, use it. You don't have to come across as, a humanitarian, socialist, feminist, vegetarian, peace lover in the speaking exam. Opinions will get marks. So just be as, if you want to be on the fence, do sit on the fence. No one's going to judge you for it.
Yeah, there is an element of acting involved as well. So when you're actually in the exam, just be passionate, kind of play along with the examiner, be really opinionated, and I think that
just
does
fight
actually
back.
help a little bit.
Argument week was great for that. Fight back.
Yeah, that was excellent. And also it goes without saying that practice is the most important thing for the speaking exam. So find a friend. Me and James did it quite a lot in the run-up to the exam. Meet up outside of college or in lunchtimes, just practice, go over every single topic that you can, and that really does help so much, because aside from helping you practice, the different structures and stuff, it really improves your confidence and your fluency.
I think with everything else that you might find a little sort of tiring and testing at times, because it is testing, having to get it accurate and get it right and get enough in. Try and make it something you enjoy. Like I had a couple of friends and we...
food at the same time.
We turned it into a drinking game. Oh. So we did shots whenever someone got something wrong.
Not that we're endorsing alcohol.
Yeah, well, no, not at all. No, evil, awful stuff. But drinking games.
We just went for coffees and had cake. So.
Did you Skype friends as well?
Yeah,
we
well,
don't have Skype.
I FaceTimed.
Yeah,
it's
FaceTime.
essentially the same thing.
Okay.
But no, that did help.
Yeah, that does help.
I'd also say don't, because if you just end up practicing by yourself all with the same person, not the issue. You kind of end up asking similar things, but then closer to the exam, Shirley and the conversation teacher were running a separate and additional speaking practice where we have just an actual mock rather than a lengthy kind of wavy conversation, just the actual time that you would be doing in the exam, asking different questions and things you might not have been asked before. Because then if you've done that, by the time you get to the exam, you've probably already basically had the conversation you're going to have at some point.
Yeah. And a specific tip would be for one of the cultural topics in the speaking exams, because I don't know if it would be the same while you're watching this, but the Second World War, for example, they might ask you for 3 aspects. Talk about the one you're most interested in first, because there's a chance, like it happened to me and a couple of others I know as well, where I mentioned my first aspect, he asked me a question on my first aspect, and we didn't even get to the other 2 because we talked for so long on the first aspect. So if you've got a particular area of a topic that you're more confident on, mention that as early as you can.
Oh, and also be prepared for surprises, because even though the examiner is very nice, he may throw some awkward things at you. Like he asked us about films about the war, which obviously we'd watched, but I personally wasn't really expecting a question about it. So that obviously involved quite a lot of spontaneity, so it's worth preparing.
So, don't get upset if you don't get to say something that you know is good that you've learned before, because the examiner will say on the day that if you're talking, you're scoring. So the fact is, you probably, even if you've prepared something really good that you don't get to say, you'll probably know something just as good anyway. And if you say something spontaneously that's not perfect, that probably get more marks than something that they can tell is pre-learned. So just kind of, just try and do it as well as you can on the spot. That's what it's about.
Do you have any hints and tips then for A2 students starting off the new course in September? What do you know now that you perhaps would have liked to have done slightly differently?
Be prepared for a lot of work. I know Shelley was saying in the first lesson with her classic speech, I will work you hard. Trust me, you have no idea. But just be willing to do it. Bear in mind that you've got 7-8 months of this tops. You put the hard graft in for 7-8 months. You've got a long summer ahead of you, and if you can come out of that exam at the end of it feeling, you don't know how you're going to have done by the mark, but if you come out feeling like you've given it your best shot and you feel confident, you can then go and enjoy your summer. And I think it's like at the start of the year, it's having something at the end of it, I think, to motivate you and to get you through it. And on a French-specific basis, that really helps with putting you through things like the grammar, like doing C plus pluperfect plus conditional perfect, stuff like that, that maybe takes the extra effort. It's just knowing that actually, if you put that extra effort in, you're going to have a great time for 3 or 4 months when it's out of the way. And actually, you almost have as much free time as you spend working.
I think my best tip would be, and obviously we've already touched on it, but because French is something that's cumulative, is that a word? It's something that adds up rather than...
Cumulative.
That's the one. Rather than something like, a different subject, maybe history, where you have a set syllabus which you need to learn. French is, there's always more to learn, there's always more words, there's always more grammar, there's always just more fluency that you can add. So the more you do, the more you improve. So just start from the first day, learn the vocab, just practice as much as you can and really make resources as you go along.
I think keeping a log of what you do can be quite helpful, just so you can visualise yourself, like what you've done. So maybe, I started doing this later in the year. I wish I'd done it earlier, to be honest. But I took an A3, or not an A3, at Excel spreadsheet, and so first week I'd schedule 1 block, then 2 blocks, 3 blocks, so I could see it getting higher and higher as to how much work I'd done, and it's just visualising that progression. So not, if you do TF1, write down, did TF1 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. This came up, they talked about this, and you'll see that you're able to note down more week upon week as you start picking it up, and if you can visualise it, it is quite a confidence boost, I think.
I think I would say at the beginning you're probably not going to be very good, but that's kind of the whole point, because you'll notice your teachers are completely on your side. They know what you need to know. They literally you have to use them as much as you can, so they know what is going to get the marks. They're very wise. So you just have to try and keep going. And
left-hand décolleté quite like Shirley.
No,
no
one.
And,
Not even
and
the actors.
also with your classes as
All
well,
director.
you're all kind of doing the same thing, and then by the end, like the family.
I think also keep reminding yourself while you're studying French, because obviously you'll need to get a certain grade in it for uni or work or whatever it is you're planning to do, but remember that it is a life skill. So even if even if you only need a low grade or it's your fourth subject and you don't need a particularly high grade or you're not doing languages at university, it's something that's going to help you for a really long time. And if you do as much as you can this year and take advantage of the teaching and of the resources, then it's a really good skill to have and something that will probably aid you in later life.
And part of that, I think, is getting yourself involved in the culture as well, because the A2, when you do France during the war, there's a lot of collaboration. There's the capitulation, you do the environment, and you learn about the problems France has had in the past environmentally. You look at racism, crime. It can make you sit back and go, God, France is a nasty place, and it's not. You know, France is a wonderful country, and I think it's getting that around your head as well, that you are opening. I hate to use a cliche, but you're opening doors here to this incredible, diverse country. It's keep bearing that in mind as well. And of course, the wine is. It's quite
Good.
as well.
Did any of you come on the trip?
We.
Which trip was that?
France.
Last year? Yes. Yeah, of course. Not
Yes.
this year. Yeah.
No.
Last year.
How did you benefit from that?
Oh, loads, absolutely.
Immensely.
I think, obviously from the language, because you're actually staying in a family of French people who are fluent in language, kind of goes without saying. So that really helps being completely immersed in it. But I think for me the most interesting thing was being immersed in the culture. So just the small things like how the French live, you know, how their children get ready for school in the morning, everything like that. I found that really, really interesting to see, just a different way of life. And obviously all the sites are fascinating and you go to really interesting places and it's just very privileged to go on it.
I think it's a bit of a. It's not a culture shock, but you wonder how different the culture is over there from over here with regard, things like responsibilities with kids and the way they eat and the way everyone sits down to eat. It was great from that perspective. It was great from a language point of view as well. I think I picked up so much from that I wouldn't have picked up in any textbook. And it's a great way as well, I think, to get to know people in your French class. I mean, that goes without saying that when you come to revise speaking, the more people you can talk to, the more people you can approach. It's great, and the trip was great for that. Like I bonded with so many people because I went in the AS year, so I bonded with so many people from other classes that were in some of them were in my A2 class.
Everyone became friends really.
It's a great trip for that as well. So I highly recommend it.
One of my AS students said this year in our evaluation that it's not just about what you do in the lesson that counts for French, it's what you do outside of the lesson. So what have you been doing for independent learning? What would you recommend?
I think there'll be times where it comes around to like writing an essay or doing an exercise where you'll notice something that you particularly find challenging or that you particularly need to improve on. So then it's kind of brainstorming, thinking of ways that I'm going to do that. So for example, if you aren't good at getting examples into your essay, then watch the film and get examples. Or if you're not good at structuring a paragraph, write loads of paragraphs. It will seem really tedious at the time, but it'll be worth it. And things like with listening exercises, if there's a particular kind of exercise that you can't do, just do them all over and over again. So it's kind of a case of being a bit harsh with yourself and saying that if you carry it really is practice does make perfect. So it's as long as you can recognise, and you can be open enough to recognise what is going wrong or what's bringing down your marks, then that's what you have to do in your own time. Obviously, you can't wait till everyone else's time in the lesson, so you'll come back and it'll be better.
Yeah, I agree with James on that. It's targeting specific areas. It's quite useful. But also, like, stuff you can do independently. I'm sure everyone's got the internet. TF1, France 2, again.
Yeah, just keep going.
They may seem quite remedial, they may seem quite small things, but they are immensely helpful throughout the year.
Also, I think the important thing is just keeping the French going in your daily life and outside of your main studies. But possibly a good thing to do would be to apply it to what you really enjoy doing. So French, obviously you'll enjoy French because you're studying it. But if you're really into film, or even if you're into stuff like maths and science, apply it. So write an essay on a different subject, perhaps in French. I think I did that with economics. I tried. There was a lot of vocab I didn't really know, but I tried to do that in French to practice my writing skills, or watch programs, or even if you're into drama, for example, try acting out a skit in French. Just keep it going and apply it to the things that you love, so you'll enjoy it more.
Any memorable moments from the year?
Large amount of cake.
Yeah, a lot of cake.
I have a memory of I came into a lesson and I was quite tired and I was a little bit down, and Shirley was just like, just have my cake. She just gave me some cake.
Yeah.
So that was nice.
Basically, if you come in pulling puppy dog eyes, you are likely to get cake. So
that's a good thing to remember throughout the year.
Eve, wonderful Eve. I probably shouldn't be naming him, but I'm going to. and his you'll soon discover Truffaut. You may have already discovered Truffaut and his caméra subjective. Well, we ended up with caméra subjonctive, which I think just shows how much grammar sort of took over our lives towards the end of the exam. Other remember Dan Austin.
Shirley turning up with about a ton of new booklets.
Oh yeah, it's every lesson.
Probably once every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
they made it special.
Yeah.
You felt loved.
They become your rock. The
They
booklets.
do.
By the end of A2 French, you will own
Literally your
a
rock.
portion of the Amazon.
Yeah, you will. That's very true.
And I think other memorable moments. Argument week.
That was always good. I think just dissecting a film so much that you basically become the director. As we said, Shirley just has unmeasurable
Infinite knowledge.
on left antiquity.
Also,
That's always good.
when you kind of feel like Shirley is waging a personal war on AQA, but you kind of feel like you're her army in quite a nice,
Yeah.
social kind of aspect.
Mm.
So it's quite nice you kind of come to training sessions in a way, and it makes something to fight for.
Mm.
So where are you heading now? In September,
In
October,
September, I was about to say home. No, grades allowing, University of Nottingham to do modern European studies with French and Spanish.
Brilliant.
I'll be doing French and Spanish either at Cambridge if I get the grades or Bristol, which is my insurance choice.
Hopefully French and Spanish as well at Cambridge or UCL.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. That was a real pleasure.
Thank you.